Welcome to the 2015 CES. Thank you for coming to this presentation. Thank you for coming to the show. We hope you're having a wonderful and productive time. I am Michael Petricone, Head of Government Affairs for the Consumer Electronics Association, the producer of the International CES. And today, we have the extraordinary pleasure of talking to Aneesh Chopra. Aneesh is a remarkable innovator, entrepreneur. He served as Secretary of Technology for the state of Virginia. He was then appointed by President Obama as the very first ever Chief Technology Officer for the United States of America. And his job was to figure out how technology could spur job growth and be leveraged to boost industry and improve our policies on education and healthcare, the environment, and other issues. And now he's written a book called The Innovative State: How New Technologies Can Transform Government. We're going to talk about it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. You walk through the halls of CES.
Yes.
And you see all these new extraordinary technologies everywhere. They've transformed the way we work and live and made our lives more productive and more efficient. And somehow those technologies have a very hard time getting into the government public sector. It's like there's some impermeable barrier going on. What's happening?
Well, fixing that interface, I believe, will unlock the key to solving the big challenges of our era. So if we were to measure success, if you look a decade ahead, did we affect healthcare by making it more affordable and accessible through entrepreneurship and innovation? Did we make our energy system cleaner and more reliable? Did we have an educational system that ensured every child had the chance to live his or her economic potential? The answer will be based on the degree to which we have easier methods for entrepreneurs to connect in with government, not so much being overly regulated or basically shying away from, but getting that relationship just right. And the book is about how we do that, and I think we're on the right path.
And what exactly are the barriers? Is it a matter of procurement that in the government, by the time you get the new technology, it takes so long, it's not new anymore? What are the structural barriers that make it difficult to do?
So let's start with the bigger picture. Number one, the role of the public sector in our lives. We have today in health, energy, education, safety, all of these facets of our lives today are regulated. And in some cases, there's an operational role for government. We're buying stuff and doing stuff. But by and large, it's a regulatory question. And those are for protection purposes. We want to keep people protected and safe. At the same time, those are industries that have not had the kind of productivity gains that the rest of the economy has seen, largely on account of these new technologies based on the internet. So the question that I grappled with is this barrier something that's just innate to the relationship, or is there something that we can do to change that dynamic? And the answer is, in large part, the barrier is more cultural and philosophical. That is to say, there's this proverbial wall, a wall of disbelief that suggests that we can't find a way to solve these problems. And that the key, Michael, is that if we can learn from each other that that wall is actually paper thin, we can punch through that wall and actually find ways to make things happen. So, in some cases, it's the government buying stuff, but that's the minority. In the overwhelming share, it's saying the following: I've just invented an incredible tool that will make your home smart. And by the way, if that smart home device could have access to your energy consumption data from the utility company, I might provide for you recommendations on how you can double your own energy productivity, leave a great life in the home at half the amount of energy. If every American had the kind of technologies that empowered them to live a better quality of life at half the energy consumption per capita, what would that mean to our energy footprint and our productivity? It would be through the roof. Right now, that interface is stuck because the relationship between the utilities and the startups that I saw in CES is such that that safely and securely protected data can't be touched. But a convening role in government, as we demonstrate an innovative state to create the green button standard, now there's an evolving movement that says a consumer is entitled to an electronic copy of the energy data about them in their home, if the utility has it. And if I choose to share that with a smart home app because of an amazing product I found at CES, that's my right and my opportunity. And getting those kinds of barriers dropped, that public-private interface right, it's not about the government buying those tools. I'm buying them here at CES or the companies that are selling them, but I want a rule in place that allows me to have that data and to live a better life. That's happening in all these sectors of the economy in part because of the ideas we talk about in innovative states.
So what's the low-hanging fruit here? What can be done simply and immediately? Would you say it's making government data more easily accessible and usable?
That is the easiest and most obvious way to go. So a lot of what we're learning about today is that the internet-based economy flourishes with data. Data is the oil of the information economy. And where is the biggest reservoir of data? You know, what's the Saudi Arabia of data? And in most countries, it's the public sector. The public sector is collecting tons of data, often for regulatory and oversight purposes. And the question is, can we make that data more widely available to allow entrepreneurs and innovators to build better products and services in ways that we hadn't even imagined? And that's, I think, the low-hanging fruit.
Right, and what are the barriers? What needs to be done?
So here's the best part. When you go to graduate school in public policy, you're taught how to help lobby to make a bill become a law. But you're not taught that you have the right to open up data that is the public's to have access to by default. So in place, not just in the White House, the president certainly did this, but in all levels of government, you're starting to see an affirmative order that data held by the government, by and large, should be made available to the public in machine-readable form. So, for example, if I wanted to know the weather, you and I can whip out our smartphones and use any app you want to access the weather. Yahoo's got a cool new weather app, weather.com. But you all might also realize that the underlying data for all those weather apps, it's a $5 billion economy, comes from the government, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And so the principle is, how many more sectors of the economy might have that kind of relationship? Wildly entrepreneurial private sector, powered in part by data that the government uniquely has access to liberate GPS, a whole number of data sets that are in that category. So I think the barrier is knowing that they can make this available, and that is coming down rapidly at all levels of government.
So nowhere is the technology gap the greatest, I don't think, than in terms of how we deliver and how we measure healthcare outcomes.
Yes.
From a government side, how can technology revolutionize that?
Well, this is the most important question. Part of it is technology, but let me describe that as the 20 of the 80-20 rule. The bigger question in any of these systems is, how do we create the capacity for innovation? And what I mean by that is, there are so many amazing devices out there, ideas on how to make healthcare work better. Their problem isn't we need yet one more idea. There's so many ideas. The problem is, do we have the capacity to test and validate those ideas and to scale what works? And that is a new capacity that we're bringing into the government. Part of the Affordable Care Act said we should be testing new models to reward technologies and services that are, many of which are part of what's being demonstrated here, so that they can thrive while also lowering costs. What do I mean by that? Right now, a doctor and a hospital gets paid every time you go there to see them. And that's great. That's our $2+ trillion economy is driven by this relationship. You go, you get care, you get paid. What's happening is that we're starting to say we should be paying people for having healthier outcomes. So if I can treat you better, I should be rewarded for that treatment. Pay me for my quality. And the big differential between someone who's just paid by service and one that's rewarded for quality is the use of these new technologies that can both measure and improve upon the quality that's being delivered. So now that we have new payment models, we're creating the conditions for those technologies to be tested in the marketplace to see whether or not that $100 blood pressure cuff that I saw over at CES is worth investing in to get those likely hypertensives monitored at home more cheaply than waiting for them to end up in the emergency room and God forbid, with a heart attack.
Right. And all of that would require the data to be shared.
Yes.
With you and your devices and your doctors. And for the value will come when all these different stakeholders, right,
yes,
have access to your data. What are the privacy implications of that? How do we work through it?
So one of the biggest, I think, opportunities and challenges is that in health, energy, education, data that's held in a legal context has very significant privacy protections. That is to say, you don't, when you go to your doctor, you don't envision that they're broadcasting on the internet your health condition. They'd be fined if they did such a thing. But on the other hand, you would like that doctor to share with your blood pressure cuff at home so that that information can seamlessly and securely be transmitted. The key, Michael, is the right of the patient. One of the most important things that we reinterpreted in the first term of the Obama administration was that HIPAA is both a protector of your data, but also a liberator. Here's an example. Every single patient is entitled to an electronic copy of his or her medical data if it's held electronically by the entity in question. And that interpretation of HIPAA is starting to create the conditions for that smart blood pressure cuff to say, hey, patient, why don't you ask your doctor for your medical records data? It'll inform what I'm doing with the blood pressure cuff so I can give you better alerts and reminders so that we can treat you better. And by the way, that doctor might want to have access back to that information. So the principle of the patient mediating access, Michael, we have this thing on the internet called OAuth. It's how all of our connected apps work. You want to log in with Facebook. You're essentially trusting, you're decentralizing a trust model. It is now the case that that is a setting in all policy, in health, in energy, in education. If I have a right to my own data and I can bring my own apps to the party, we will start to see a great deal of innovation, and that's just one small example of how we balance privacy and security. You want to protect against the doctor broadcasting your medical records writ large, but you want to have a clear pipe that I get my own data and I can route it to whomever I trust.
And let's switch over to, I think, the other area that is ripe for positive disruption from the government is education.
Absolutely.
Right? If your grandfather walked into a modern day classroom, he would instantly understand a row of kids sitting there looking up at one person at the front. Right? It has been undisrupted for decades. How can the kind of access to data that you're talking about improve and make better the traditional education classroom?
So I ran an experiment. My daughters go to the public school in our local community, and actually where your headquarters are located. And the experiment I ran was, how much data does the institution, the school, have on my kids? And it turns out, like every state, they test a lot. So over the course of my daughters' lives, they will take roughly 1,000 questions in sort of testing to say, do you know fractions, proportions, and what math means? Well, the first question I asked was, as a parent, can I get access to the raw data about what it is that my child seems to know or not know? Or more importantly, can my child have access to that data? And here's why. Imagine a world where the family coming home says, if I had access to that raw data and I could feed it to an app, they might curate the Khan Academy videos only to highlight those videos that speak to the issues that my daughter is having some trouble with. And that kind of personalized support service that extends the classroom to my home and vice versa is very much going to be about how do we get everyone to have live their full potential. And that interface, can I get my data from the school and can I hand it off to the Khan Academy? That doesn't happen today. We're trying to move that. Again, the My Data initiative in education is to get us there. But that's just one small example. The next piece is, let's assume I have figured out as an adult, I want to retrain my skills. You know, I've got some skills, but I've got to retrain myself for the jobs of the future. If I could sort of hand off a list of my skills to an entrepreneur who says, you know what, I've mapped your skills against the jobs that are coming. Here are some specific, 3-month boot camps that you might enroll in to get the skills that you need. We also need to have regulatory on-ramps so that those boot camps can be treated as part of our workforce system. So we've got to have, we can't just rely on the traditional universities to provide all our workforce needs. We're going to have to start to see accelerated learning programs. So if you think about these two things, you open up the data to fuel new products, and then you create on-ramps for them to be accessible by student loans for new programs that create more accelerated learning. You start to create a virtuous cycle for innovation so that everybody gets the educational support they need at all levels of their lives. That's the future, I hope.
So much of this depends on successfully inculcating a startup mentality.
Yes.
In government.
Yes.
One challenge you have that startups, in startups, success is iterative. Right?
Yes.
It tends to be characterized by successive failure and failure and failure and failure, and then finally you succeed.
Correct.
When it comes to delivery of government services, the failure is that's not tolerated. You can't do it. How do you work around that?
So I call this building up the innovation management pipeline. That is, how do you create muscle? If we're going to go to the gym in the public sector, what we want to work on is how to think smarter about innovation pipeline management. So what does that mean? That means in the Medicare Innovation Center, if a doctor says, I want to bundle a new service that allows me to video consult my patients before and after I treat them, and I want to get paid differently as a result of that, that may be a good idea. How much should they get paid? How much value are they offering the system? Rather than say the whole country gets to do this in one big shot, let's run an experiment. Okay, let's have a little trial. And then if there's evidence in the trial that actually improved quality and lowered costs, let's validate and then scale up that idea. So we have that framework now in the Medicare Innovation Center that has the capacity to test, validate, and scale new payment models. We should do the same in learning. We have a thing called the Experimental Sites Authority. So if you want to create a brand new higher education institution that eventually wants to access student loans, but it's not today an accredited four-year university, how do we use the Experimental Sites Authority to say, we're going to run an experiment here in Detroit to give folks coding skills, and if there's a program that can deliver those skills at lower costs and better value, maybe we can allow them access to student loans. So you start to create that muscle of test, validate, and scale, and it's managed properly the way a private sector manages new product development.
Right, on an iterative basis.
That's exactly right.
Kind of a staged rollout. So one thing you talked about in your book, by the way, Aneesh has a book. It's a very good book. Don't forget the book. One thing you talk about in the book is offering cash rewards.
Prizes.
To people in the prizes. To people in the private sector who successfully tackle difficult government problems. That sounded to me like extreme common sense. Tell me, has that ever been done? Can we start doing it tomorrow? How do we start doing that?
One of the things I loved about Washington is, raise your hands if you think that we've got dysfunction in Washington. Okay, yeah. So the presumption is that we have that by default. I lived a slightly different chapter of my life in Washington. A lot of what we worked on, Michael, had bipartisan support, including prize authority. This was an idea that had been tested in DARPA going back maybe a decade or two. And we went to the Congress with the reauthorization of the America Competes Act and essentially a near unanimous support to say every federal agency should have the authority to run prizes up to $50 million, and they're all available at challenge.gov. And this culture of prizes had its origins back in the UK. You know, going back into the 1700s, we had a tough time determining longitude at sea. About 1,400 sailors lost their lives in Scilly because they couldn't determine longitude at sea. And the expert at the time was Sir Isaac Newton. The country kind of turned to Isaac Newton and said, you know, oh, Godfather Newton, can you solve the problem? And even Sir Isaac Newton couldn't come up with the answer. So by issuing essentially a prize that's in today's dollars about a $3 million prize, they found a local watchmaker who probably was not on the list of the top 100 people to call to solve the problem, yet he had envisioned a new way of solving the issue with a chronometer, what became the chronometer, and ultimately answered the call. And so today we're having this idea of non-traditional problem solvers applying their ingenuity in ways that they hadn't expected. The tattoo artist in Las Vegas, where we're standing right now, joining a team to respond to a privately financed prize to double the rate of oil spill cleanup after the BP oil spill. A tattoo artist in Vegas, in less than a year, joined a team that doubled the rate of oil spill cleanup that hadn't seen improvements since the Exxon Valdez spill in the 1980s. So challenges bring about new, fresh thinking to old problems, and you don't have to have a PhD in procurement physics to participate. Anybody, it doesn't matter your lot in life, your status as a government contractor, anyone can participate, and it's just a chance for us to tap smarter thinking to solve problems.
When I was reading this book, I kept on thinking the great thing about these ideas, I'd have, you know, logjam is the default status for Congress right now. Republicans and Democrats don't agree on much, not a lot gets done. But I would imagine pretty much everybody agrees the government should be cheaper and more efficient and work better.
Yes, and open.
And open. So are these a set of ideas that maybe everybody in Washington can just get together on and move forward with?
If there's one phrase to think about for this book that just, okay, what's this conversation about? Just remember handshakes and handoffs. The characteristic of these ideas is that in politics, we've already shaken hands. Darrell Issa, who used to be chairman here at the Consumer Electronics Association, Darrell Issa joined hands with President Obama to put forward the Open Data, the Data Act, among many other initiatives like this. So Washington has already shaken hands. Every idea in the book is law. These are not wishes for future law. They're law now. And they happened in a period of time when people thought we were having this sort of dysfunction. And so handshakes is what a lot of these ideas are. Politics have handshook. But it's not so much about making government effective. That's a good comment, but it's necessary but not sufficient. You need handoffs to the American people. What that means is you don't have the Yahoo weather app unless they've taken the handoff from the NOAA to get the data to build the Yahoo weather app. And so the handoffs are the opportunities for entrepreneurs and innovators to participate and to build new products and services on a more open and innovative government platform. That, to me, is the big opportunity, and why I wrote the book was really about educating the entrepreneurs that these opportunities exist. You know, one of the most exciting things is my successor, Todd Park, he taught me that opening up the data was like the easy small stakes. That's table stakes. The key was to go talk to the thousands of developers who didn't know that that data was available and encourage them to put it to use. The number of entrepreneurs who are entering the healthcare field is astronomical, and it's because many of them are tinkering with open data. And that's part of where I think this culture is starting to change.
And in the book, you just make the case that if we could take all the stuff that's in these 2 million square feet and somehow getting it into government, it would be just fundamentally paradigm shifting. So my question to you is, there's going to be a new administration coming in,
yes,
and new people, and innovation will have advanced even further by then. If you could give this new administration one piece of advice about how to take these new innovations and leverage them and improve our delivery of services to citizens, what would that advice be?
To me, it goes back to that history lesson for why Kodak struggled and Instagram thrived. And that is, we need to build that innovation pipeline management capacity across the government. So we've got a lot of the raw material in place, but now we want to have more formalized processes. So the reason I mentioned the Kodak story is, you know, Kodak invented digital photography. So it's not like they didn't have the idea. They invented it. But Kodak failed to manage that innovation pipeline. And the failure was in the management decision, not so much their lack of ideas. They couldn't think of an Instagram. No, they were there before Instagram. And so my point was, if there's one idea, anytime there's a new concept or approach to problem solving, there should be this notion of a bottom-up platform so that ideas that don't have the lobbyist insider connections, they don't know Michael, they don't know Aneesh, they can't get you on speed dial to bring their idea to Washington, they should have a chance to bring those ideas, and there should be a thoughtful process to test, to validate, and ultimately scale the ideas that work. That's what I think is missing right now, that innovation pipeline management paradigm, and I think it's starting to come. We're starting to see that muscle form.
Great. Thank you very much. You're here at the International CES with Aneesh Chopra, author of The Innovative State. If you care about government working in the 21st century, this is going to be one of the most important books you will ever read. This book is phenomenal. I read it. I highlighted it. There's great stuff in here. Aneesh will be signing it at the booth to our left, and you can buy it. And again, if you're interested in policy and a functional government and innovation, how it works, get this book. Thank you, Aneesh.
Thank you for having me.